we'll do the live thing first. Like. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. You might not recognize me with someone else on the screen, but if it's your first time here, welcome. We love to do kind of solo episodes, and obviously we love to have our guests on too. So, follow the podcast, hit that bell so you get the notifications. If you want to DM us for any questions or comments or anything, hit us up on our Twitter or our Instagram at the Bigmark podcast, at the Bigmark pod. You can hit us and support us on our Twitter. Don't hit us there, actually, but hit us up on our Patreon, and you can support the podcast. There's a few different tiers. Patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. And like I said, we'd like to do our little solo episodes, but with things opening back up, we're proud to welcome back to the podcast my great friend Darren Brooks. How are you, brother?
I'm good, man.
Good to see you. Give me some skin. Yeah, nice to touch you.
Yeah,
it's been a while. I think we were just talking about it. I know we could have looked this up, but I think we were saying it was like the 11th podcast we ever did, and this is the 61st episode. So it's been a while.
I want to say not last November, but the November before that.
Wow.
Right?
It's been a while. So bear with us, everybody watching and listening. We don't have our young Jamie. We don't have Christian with us today, but I'm gonna be on the ones and twos as well. And again, it's been a while. 2 years. Been a lot of fucking shit going on over the last couple of years. That's for sure. Darren, if you guys watch closely in the opening sequence of the podcast, Darren is actually in the opening sequence there.
Sweet.
Where are you? Number 4.
Oh,
Holy shit.
Nice. That's my lucky number, allegedly.
Unreal.
That I decided when I was a kid.
Very cool. How'd you decide that?
I think because my dad was a massive Bobby Orr fan, number 4, so
Nice.
Naturally I just kind of adopted that.
Bobby
also,
Orr.
mustache game, significantly stronger. In
Yes.
the first I tried to bring it back with the, I don't know, I was about to
It's
call
nice.
it.
That handlebar is beautiful.
It's not bad, but that's a few months.
You suit the handlebar really well, though, I have to say.
Yeah.
It chisels your face up. Not that your face isn't already chiseled.
It's unfortunate. Like, usually when I shave a mustache, it's because I want to look in the mirror and think it's hilarious. But it doesn't look
as... rocking muzzies back then, too.
Yours is good.
But mine's just like, I just
dope.
removed the beard. So I have, technically years ahead. So I'm not even going to talk.
Yeah.
My pops used to rock the fuzz duster real hard.
Yeah?
Yeah. How about yours? It was a big thing back when our dads were young.
Yeah, I think my dad may have gone through the phase, but I don't think it was a staple for him. I have uncles who are hardcore with the stash.
Nice. Still to this day?
Oh, my God, yeah.
Unreal. Super sick. But yeah, like we were saying, tons of fucking shit has happened. I was just listening to Can't Hurt Me this morning, and it just turns out we were just talking on when Darren was coming, and you listened to a little bit today too.
Yeah, I listened to a little bit today.
So the book I think we even talked about this last podcast, but the book for those who don't know, David Goggins wrote this book called Can't Hurt Me. And what was it? Maybe 2 years ago, he was on Rogan with it. Maybe even longer.
I think probably longer. Yeah, he's
probably
been on a couple times.
Yeah, pre-COVID for sure. But the first time this gentleman went on Joe Rogan, he just kind of blew up essentially.
Yeah,
and it's interesting because you had lent me an actual physical copy of the book. I was reading it for a little bit. I got through the first couple chapters, and then you needed it back, and I hadn't finished it, but I had downloaded the audiobook, and I was ready to listen to the audiobook because it's just a little bit easier. When I was delivering beer for the brewery, I was fucking downloading books, man. I was listening to so many audiobooks. I didn't listen to the fucking radio or any music.
Yeah.
I just listened to fucking so many audiobooks, and since I've been doing more sales, I haven't been listening as much. So it was nice just throwing something on, because I've kind of reached a bit of a podcast wall, if so to speak. All the podcasts I like, I've listened to kind of most of them.
Do you listen to Lex's podcast?
I have, yeah.
Okay,
so
cool.
The problem with Lex is that I really like his stuff. It's just so information heavy.
Yeah.
That I feel I have to sit and focus. Where, not to say that there's other podcasts that don't have that amount of information, but let's just say, for instance, some Joe Rogan episodes where he's talking to a fellow comedian.
Yeah.
Like there's not going to be a lot of substance. There's probably going to be a couple gems, stories in there, maybe stuff that's funny, but you can like get away with not listening to certain shits.
Totally.
But then even some of his other guests, like you feel like you want to sit there, like that Parks girl. What was her, the Korean, the girl from
Oh, I didn't
from
see
North
that one.
Korea.
I just heard all about it.
Yao-Mi Parks, or I forget her name, but she was like, had escaped from North Korea, and she was on the podcast, and that one was like so information dense. It was like you had to sit there and listen to every moment of it.
Yeah.
Because you felt that, Yeon-Mi Park, really, really interesting story. Like she, and probably one of the better Joe Rogan Spotify episodes in a long time. Oh yeah. Cheers, my brother.
Cheers.
I have a little malted beverage here. Cheers, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming. You know, it's really interesting with these, like, I've talked to a lot of my friends, a lot of other friends about it, and some friends I haven't even talked to about it, and I'm not even sure if they have reservations about it, but before we were kind of coming on, it was a little bit, I wouldn't say you had reservations, but we just didn't know what we were going to talk about, kind of thing, right?
For sure.
And I that's the one thing that I never really wanted the show to be, was like, we have to talk about one thing. And it just so happens that we were both listening to Can't Hurt Me, which is perfect.
Yeah.
But you know, we were even saying before, right? Like, you know, it's just we just want it to be a convo, and we just want to kind of just chill and do our thing. But obviously cameras and recording everything, it's always worrisome. But again, it's not live.
Yeah.
You know, we can always edit, so it's always cool. It's always nice, and having a couple beers always nice. It's nice to relax that way too, right?
It is. And I didn't have a specific subject necessarily that I wanted to talk about, but I was feeling very ranty this week, so I thought I could channel that energy. But unfortunately, I had my first jiu-jitsu experience in a long time today, and I'm a lot more chill than I have been.
Sweet.
And it actually crossed my mind this morning to not go, so I was kind of pissed when I got here.
Oh shit.
But I'm feeling more calm than I have been all week. So
why did you not want to go? Like,
to jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Well, I just feel like I had all this pent-up aggression and stuff, and I could have maybe fueled that, and it would have resulted in better conversation, as opposed to being so chill.
Sure.
Because I feel chill and tired, and I'm
Right.
sure we'll have a good conversation, but it might be less animated than it would have been otherwise,
Sure.
but maybe not. We're just getting started. We're going to have a beer, so we'll
Well,
see where it takes us.
It's interesting. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be like a debate, because I feel like a debate would be closer to like verbal jujitsu. But like a podcast could be something similar, where it's like a mental exercise, right? Where you know, you're now trying to, because I feel like and again, we were just talking about this before we hit record too, that it's just gonna take more and more practice the more people I have on here too, because I'm definitely hesitant to have like strangers on still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like no real reason. It's just, you know,
But you don't know where everybody's at. Like
even just organizing, everything's been relatively easy with this podcast. You know, I can kind of throw it on. It's, you know, I do it in my room here. Like, it's easy, right? But yeah, it's not out of the realm. And then now with things getting back to, people aren't as sketched out about having people over, coming over, or doing whatever, right? That's always a stumbling block too. But I find that it is like essentially that mental jujitsu where or conversational jujitsu at least, where, you know, I'm giving you an idea and then that's the little bit of a stumbling block I'm coming across, that I feel like a debate is maybe closer to jiu-jitsu, because you're actually trying to...
Yeah, it's more combative. Like, we're not necessarily trying to get in arguments or anything like that, but something you say will provoke a counter that will make me say something else and will lead to something else. And,
right.
Yeah.
So in a way, at least, like, it's a sparring version of that, or at least it's like a really light version of it, where we're just trying to like roll, more or less.
Yeah.
We're just learning from each other, and it can go bad if I don't like go with you
Yeah.
Right. Like, you know, you could break my arm, my mental arm.
Yeah.
If I resist, essentially, with certain things.
It's like if you're in an improv class.
Correct.
And somebody tries to go a certain way and the other
Yes,
person's like, no, I'm not that person.
Yes, and.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, right? Is that I think a lot of people not only are just like waiting for their turn to speak in conversation, which I think I do. I think everyone does. And everyone can always improve on that. But it's also that resistance in conversation doesn't lead to better conversation.
Yeah.
Never.
For sure.
And I find all the, a lot of the issues in today, there's this, like, kind of point where, like, no one's willing to, like, accept the other person's ideas at any point, because as soon as you do, you've lost.
Yeah.
Right? Or as soon as you say one thing in favor of the opposing argument, you're now on their side. And that's so unfair because that's not true.
Totally.
No one is 100% one thing.
Yeah.
Or right?
Totally. And we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Like just the idea of people wanting things to be black and white when most issues are in the gray area. But it's hard for people to accept uncertainty and things like that.
Totally. Yeah. And talk about uncertainty. My goodness. But that Yeonmi Parks thing, back to that, it was one of the only, like, kind of good Joe Rogan episodes I listened to, and that was him not saying almost anything. It was one of the only podcasts where Joe Rogan was almost speechless the whole time. The shit that she talks about is so shocking, like what happens to her and her family. She has to escape, and she escapes through all this wild shit. And this was like in 2000, like mid 2000s. Wasn't like it was like in a time ago. This was kind of before they've really shut down North Korea. No one's getting out of there now. Yeah. But she was like part of the last kind of few people that were still kind of getting out of there. And but it was kind of one of those things that it's funny because we're talking about, you know, active listening, conversational jiu-jitsu. That was one of the only times where he really shut the fuck up and just let her talk. But it's funny because that's one of the better Spotify Joe Rogans. Because there's definitely been we've listened to Joe Rogan before, and there was definitely a big difference once he moved to Spotify. No.
Yeah, but I've barely even listened to him, just like I was saying, just because it's a little more inconvenient. The only time nowadays I listen to him is if I see random clips on YouTube, and then maybe that will inspire me to go listen to the rest of it on Spotify, but that's pretty rare at this point. Okay. I'm kind of excited that I have so many to catch up on, because he's had a lot of really cool guests. I listened to the whole Hicks and Gracie one on Spotify. That one was unreal. Cool. But again, just like we were talking about before the show started, a lot of what makes the Joe Rogan podcast amazing is the guests. Sure. But he is like an amazing interview when he does like shut the fuck up at the appropriate times. Yeah. And he's hit or miss, you know? Yeah. You got to give him the fact that, you know, whatever, I guess he's into 2000s, right? The 2000s for episodes. Like, I don't know. He's done over, I'm pretty sure he's done over 2000 episodes. Damn. So like that alone, and a lot of them are multiple hours. So I'm sure he's approaching the 10,000 hour point of just being a podcast host. So just for experience alone, he's like a master. Oh, he's a black belt conversationalist for sure. Precisely. And he's, if anything, some of that shit he's done in the UFC was like buds for fucking talking to people, because you're talking to people who had just got fucked up. Yeah, true. Right? Yeah. Who can barely speak, some of them, which is sad. And Joe's talked about like not talking to some of these dudes after they've been friggin' kicked in the head. And then like talk to people at the height of their like so excited, like they've won a title and they, you know, they're super stoked. And then he does fucking the commentary. So like all of that mixed together is like such a not even a crash course, but just like the hottest forge to get that conversationalist. However, that can sometimes lead to him being maybe overly aggressive in his speak, because he can be. And it's hard because he's so in the public now that he gets scrutinized so much, but he's just a human, you know, and he's a stoner. Yep. And sometimes he goes out boozing. Yeah. So you're going to get a different frequency of him at different times. Like maybe he does a podcast and he just worked out and he got 9 hours of sleep in his system, and he's been actually taking notes and reading up on his guest's expertise or whatever. Right. And then other times he's going to be hungover and baked and not fucking prepared in the slightest. And he might say some outlandish shit. And that is the shit. Crazy people. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. That's the biggest thing with Joe, is that it's so state dependent, but aren't we all? But anyway, sorry I cut you off. That's okay. Yeah.
So sometimes you were just saying like that he said some shit that's definitely questionable in the sense where it's like, you know, it's not always the same Joe Rogan essentially, and he's just a dude, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna continue with that, or
I don't know.
I blew your train of thought.
It's easy for that to happen for me. Yeah.
That's all right. We'll same thing happens to me too.
Yeah, but that's why you and I have such good conversations, because more often than not, you're good at kind of carrying the weight, you know, whereas I can kind of come in and come out and sometimes sporadically speak quickly for 30 seconds and then.
But there you go, right? There's that give and take in a conversation that you're not worried like, oh, I'm, you know, going in different directions because I'm ready to go in those directions, right? Where some people are like, what are you saying? Like, I don't even know where you're going.
Totally. Because
they're either too concentrated on their own response or whatever, right? So that's the greatest thing about our chats for sure. But I think that's the thing with Joe, and he gets so much scrutiny, and you know, of course he said shit that I don't agree with. There's no doubt about that. And I'm not here to talk about fucking Joe Rogan the whole time, but just saying like it was an interesting turn once it got to Spotify, like you said, not only because it's harder to get at, but I think because of how much money everyone knew he was getting, and then because he's so popular and so many people listen to him, I think he's just been more in the public eye lately. I don't think that necessarily has anything to do with Spotify. I think whether he was on Spotify or YouTube, I think he'd still be under these relatively strict guidelines, or not even guidelines, because no one's guiding him to do anything, which makes it difficult, because anything he says, there's so many people listening, and Dr. Fauci's fucking talking about him, and like, you know, I mean, people like, I don't know, I don't have any actual evidence of this, but I'm sure newscasters have talked about like Oprah and like some of these big name entertainment people that do have a lot of sway. Like Oprah's book club was like make or break. If you were in Oprah's book club, your book was going to be successful. If it wasn't, your book was probably not going to be successful. Yeah.
I don't even know anything about Oprah's
So Oprah's book club, Oprah, for anyone listening as well, Oprah, obviously, the television host, she was like, a lot of people consider Joe Rogan the female version of her, Jopra.
That's jokes.
So, but she was like the woman of daytime TV, and she had this book club. It was just like, these are the books that she likes, and it started relatively innocuously as like just like a segment in her show. And then it became like, it had like a sticker, and if you had this sticker on your book, it was like guaranteed to sell to like everyone who listened to Oprah. And essentially Joe Rogan has the same effect on books. Yeah. I've probably bought 10 books at least, like directly from what Joe Rogan, like books that, and again, people, this is Darren and I both said this at the beginning of the podcast. We've never listened to Joe Rogan strictly for Joe Rogan. Like we said, he's just a guy. He's an impressive guy. He's got a lot of accolades. He's done a lot of shit in his life, and he knows a lot of really cool people. But that's what it is: the people that he knows, and the guests that he can get. Like if I could fucking talk to Elon Musk, that'd be great. And no one's listening to my podcast to listen to me. They'd be listening to Elon Musk, and that's the same shit. That I find, but. Because then Joe Rogan is being broadcast to all these people, he has a voice, and I guess you have to be kind of careful with what you say. So all I'm saying is I don't know, I can't recall, I have no actual proof of if CNN has ever talked about Oprah or Maury or like whatever, some of these huge TV, Jerry Springer, not that they were like giving people like, they would give out advice and shit, like in their shows. They would have Dr. Phil, right? Like, it was just so part of mainstream, you didn't think like, oh, it's going to be in the news. But I think because Joe Rogan has, and any podcast for that matter, is now so outside mainstream media, mainstream media is then commenting on it. Yeah. You know? Totally.
And it being on the internet and there being no regulations, he has the opportunity to say some outlandish shit. Like Oprah's not going to start having some controversial conversations that are going to make headlines in the same way.
She also has mad producers. It's a big, huge show. So I don't know how much of her monologue was like her choice even, where Joe is like fully on his own. Yeah, he's got young Jamie there, who never gets fucking talked about, by the way. Young Jamie, you're a lucky son of a bitch, because you're doing crazy shit, man. He like brings up the certain shits,
Yeah.
and like he like triages some of those articles that he brings up.
What do you mean?
He only brings up certain articles.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you know he's
Yeah,
going
true
through a
that.
bunch of ones,
Yeah,
right?
that's a
And he's
good
like,
point.
he's the one that holds a lot of power.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a good point.
I'd be like, I'm about to show 10 million people this. That's like on him.
Yeah.
And he clicks that shit, right? And sometimes Joe says, put that shit away. But half the time, I want to say, Jamie's like, check this out. And they go, oh my God, look at this.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So young Jamie, you fucking are a lucky son of a bitch. But
Yeah, I never really thought about the big influence that young Jamie has.
huge.
Because, like, Joe will tell him to pull something up, and then in the meantime, he'll go back to his conversation. So
Yeah.
young Jamie could be scrolling, dismissing all these things that he doesn't like the narrative of.
Who knows?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And Jamie's gone through a lot of, again, we were just talking about it, like, as much as you know, I want to say I'm not like a diehard Joe Rogan guy. I've literally basically watched all of the episodes that I want to watch from 1 to now.
Yeah.
And that's not every episode, but that's a fucking shit ton of fucking podcasting, and I'm willing to admit that. So
Yeah,
I've seen some bad Joe, and I've also seen some bad Jamie.
Yeah.
So before it was Brian Redband, who was awful, and he would just
Yeah.
be fucking crazy and derail everything.
Yeah.
But then once they hired Jamie, there was some shit that he would bring up that was like, what the fuck is this? Or like Snopes would be like, that's wrong, and like all these debunked shit. So Jamie's also gone through that many hours of training of pulling shit up, which is, again, so, you know, Jamie's got a lot of power in his hands too. But other than that, those two guys are basically the only people that run the Joe Rogan experience, as far as I know. So there's another thing there where there's more scrutiny, right? Where it's like, you know, can say whatever he wants, so you just got to be like, he says wild shit because he can say whatever he wants.
Yeah.
So he gets under scrutiny.
Totally. Yeah. And yeah, we did have that conversation before this about how we don't love Joe Rogan.
Right.
But if I'm being honest, he's been a huge influence in my life, and I've probably listened to his content more than anybody else, or at least close to.
Yeah. And on the whole, I do, and again, I'm willing to admit that as well, that I do agree with most of the things he says. Yeah, there's a lot of controversy about his vax shit and Spotify and Neil Young pulling shit, and there's episodes being pulled with him and fucking Joey Diaz talking about crazy shit, and, you know, saying outlandish shit. But it's like, you know, that's
The minority, right?
Yeah.
And that is what I kind of get frustrated about, because I read a internet meme or something today that was like, the people who scrutinize Joe Rogan most are the ones who never really listen to him.
Sure.
Because he has sound bites that are outlandish.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if you look back at all the nice shit he said about,
my
like,
God.
I don't know, following your heart, hippie shit, I don't know, advocating exercise and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh.
How can you argue against that?
Well,
but then
he's
people
viewed-
hear like some of his controversial opinions.
Right.
And then that's all they know about him. And if you listen to what he had to say, for the most part, it's pretty nice and it's productive, and
And everyone views him as this crazy right-wing guy.
Yeah.
But he's not. He's like kind of like a hippie. If you really listen to him, he's got fucking tattoos. Not to say that is a mark of right or left wing anymore.
Yeah.
But he's had tattoos forever, and at a time that was super fucking lefty to have tattoos of a certain type, depending on the tattoos, I guess. But like full sleeves that everyone's gonna see. And then like his parents were like straight up hippies. Again, if you've listened to the podcast, he talks about this shit. And yeah, he was into kicking people in the head and taekwondo and jiu-jitsu and all his martial arts stuff, which it gets misconstrued.
Totally.
That stuff gets misconstrued so hard. As soon as and you know, I sometimes feel that way too, because there's been some people I know in my life that were really into martial arts, and they were a little bit more like kind of on the nerdy side. And would you say on the whole martial artists are like a little bit more intellectual?
I feel like there's such a spectrum.
Okay,
like
cool.
it attracts all kinds of people, because there's
Very
the
cool.
fighters who are gritty,
So
who
I'm
want to smash
guilty
things and
too.
break things,
Right.
and then there's the nerds. Like a guy that I train with, he's like 130 pounds, loves comic books, and beats people's asses.
See, and then that's my interesting view of it, where I think of people that are into it are more nerdy, where there's also people that want to fucking kill people too.
Jiu-jitsu specifically, I feel like there's less people who want to kill people.
Sure.
Because I feel like it's really humbling, and if somebody comes in with that attitude with no technique, they're going to be humbled pretty quickly, and they're probably not going to stick around.
Sure.
Whereas like, I don't know, because I don't dabble too much in the striking sports. I feel like that attracts a little bit more of people who just want to break things and
like
hurt people and stuff.
Krav Maga or something.
Oh my God.
Couldn't imagine.
Yeah, that shit's insane.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, everyone has a certain stereotype about martial arts too, right? So I think that knowing that Joe's so involved in that in the UFC, I think that guides people's thoughts too. But the guy smokes mad DMT and like mad weed.
Totally.
Like enough where he has to have a month out of the year where he doesn't do anything because he wants to like not fucking kill himself. And he takes care of himself big time too, which, he's very vocal about that. And I think that can piss a lot of people off too, right? Like he's kind of like, for anyone's listening to Darren for the first time, Darren and I actually worked together at a gym, and Darren is currently a personal trainer at Momentum Fitness in Dundas, and our whole approach at Momentum was always kind of a more holistic, welcoming approach, let's just say friendly approach to fitness, because a certain subsect of the population are fucking scared of working out, period. And those are the people we want to like welcome and give them make it not just that they're afraid, I shouldn't just say that, but people who are more timid or more hesitant to get into fitness because of certain stereotypes, gym rat dudes, dirty gyms, busy, crowded shits. We're like the we're the antidote to that, essentially. Or Momentum is the antidote to the big, huge box gym. And our approach was always welcoming, easygoing, don't scare people away from fitness, where Joe Rogan, I find, is more like, fuck you.
Yeah.
You're fat.
Get the fuck after
you're fat. Stop saying you're not.
Yeah.
And get the fucking on the shit, because I do it. Like Joe, that is the big qualm I have with Joe, is he's like, I do it, why can't everyone else do it?
Yeah,
he does ebb and flow, and he's an understanding guy, but I truly feel like he's like, oh, I don't understand these people. Like, why can't they just eat pure meat, or why can't they just sit in a float tank for 10 hours a day and shit, you know what I mean?
Whereas it took him so long to build his mind to have that become the norm, Yeah. It's frustrating when people don't have that perspective on that. It's actually really difficult for people. But also there is a place for people to just fucking work a little bit harder and dig deep and find all that stuff.
Well, you talk about Goggins.
Totally, yeah. That's a really good segue. But I just wanted to say one funny thing.
Sure.
So I just did yoga teacher training.
Wicked.
There was a couple other people there, a couple other dudes. A Marine and a former NCAA wrestler, among a lot of other things. That doesn't summarize their character, but they both love David Goggins.
Okay.
So the three of us bonded over David Goggins, among other things.
Unreal.
And there was this one conversation we were having with the group about like self-affirmations and not getting down on yourself and looking in the mirror and telling yourself that you love you and all of these things, which I think has their place.
Sure.
It went on for a really long time. People were talking about their different strategies. And then we had a little break, and the guy, NCAA wrestler guy, came over to me and he said all I could think about during that was David Goggins' technique when he looks in the mirror, because he doesn't look in the mirror and be like, oh, it's okay, like you tried your best. He looks in the mirror and is like, you're fucking fat,
right? You're
a fucking idiot, like you gotta learn some shit, get your fucking shit together. And I think that has its place, but most people aren't ready for that, and they're not ready to receive that message.
No. And I think that whole thing that David did too is, again, it's similar, funny enough, to fitness, where it's like anyone can benefit from this. It's just there's that particular approach isn't always the perfect way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like really, truthfully, anyone can benefit from a good hard look in that fucking mirror. What does he call it?
The accountability mirror.
The accountability mirror. Anyone can look in that accountability mirror, and it can go one of two ways. You can love yourself and forgive yourself and do all that stuff, which is good, and it's very important to do. But where you're really going to make progression, and I think that's the whole thing with Can't Hurt Me, the whole book being like more or less a self-help book, is it's gonna kind of fast track. It will fast track you. It seems like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah, but it's also dangerous.
it's also, that's what I was just gonna say.
Yeah.
It's also a fast track to like fucking your feet up.
Oh my god, I
what?
have injuries
Just
that
in
I
the
could blame
simplest-
on David Goggins.
In the simplest way, just fucking your feet up, period. But yeah, like going too hard, or like I worry about a lot of people who have listened to that for the first time and have done nothing.
Yeah,
Like, again, every different approach to what David's saying and like turning your life around is valid, but again, this way is kind of like the fucking like crash course, like if you just want to get shit done. You know what I mean? Or and you were kind of saying you wanted to you want to make like an annual ritual of listening to Can't Hurt Me yearly, and you're doing it right now.
yeah.
So I think that's super cool because it is very motivating. Like,
Totally.
I haven't finished it, but it is very motivating.
Yeah, and I want David Goggins to be a part of me, but I don't want that to be the dominant trait. Because I've gone through phases where I'm thinking I'm going to train for a marathon and a jiu-jitsu tournament at the same time and still go to hot yoga 4 times a week. And then I get sick and then I hurt things and it's just not sustainable.
Sure.
That being said, it does, in his words, callous your mind, and then you can draw on difficult experiences, which can push you through future difficult experiences.
For sure.
But sometimes it's not worth the physical damage that you actually do to yourself.
And there's no semblance or even just there's nothing in the book about like titrating this, like going easy, like ease into this.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Totally.
Taking it easy is not part of David Goggins' fucking vocabulary.
No, not at all.
So like, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, us being fucking personal trainers, we can kind of look at this and be like, okay, we know what you mean. But then there's like Cam Hanes motherfuckers out there. Like there are people out there that if you attach this Goggins mentality with their physical body, it could be like unstoppable, which is cool. Which is why I think it's important to look at every different fucking avenue. You never know. And even if you're a person, if you're listening to this podcast or watching, who doesn't consider themselves like mentally strong, this is a book that talks about mental toughness. Right?
Totally.
So, it's an interesting book, and you finished it before, but I think that like, a lot of people have, after they read this book, and the audiobook is actually really interesting too, because it's one of those things where it's not just, number one, David Goggins wrote this book with another guy, and the guy who wrote the book with him reads it. Right? So it's not actually David Goggins reading the book.
It's Adam something.
And he reads it, so he's like the main voice of the audiobook, but it's like half audiobook, half like podcast interview, which is super cool. And I think like that's like, so basically in the audiobook, the one dude's reading it, and then they go back to like this kind of interview segment with David Goggins and him. So you actually get to hear David Goggins talk about like the chapters, right? So you've read the actual thing, right? Like front to back. So what's kind of the difference you find with having David Goggins' voice actually come in and kind of like talk about it?
Well, I want to say that I loved reading the book, but I really liked that I had listened to David Goggins on the podcast before, so you can kind of hear his voice reading the things.
Right.
Because it is really weird hearing somebody else read David Goggins' stuff, but it works with Adam. But
I know, especially at some points where they're talking about like racism and shit, and it's just
totally.
it's like a white guy reading
yeah,
shit. And you're
but
like,
even he
okay,
says
bro.
that he feels super uncomfortable
Yeah.
saying those words and stuff.
Absolutely.
But it's cool, in between each chapter, they recap things and kind of bring to light how outlandish some of it actually is. Because we know that as the reader, but to hear Goggins recount it, and he even says stuff like, you don't need to be me,
Right.
Like, go out and challenge yourself more than you ever have, but that doesn't mean you need to fucking run 100 miles without training.
Right.
For example.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, again, I think David had a lot, and if you haven't read the book or listened to the audiobook, go check it out. But he had a lot of adversity fueling him, I think, right?
Oh,
And a lot of those people whether it's fucking Forrest Gump or Cameron Haynes, like there's some fire in those dudes.
Yeah.
That who knows, right? Like it's inexplicable, I think, or it's sadistic. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah,
right?
Forrest Gump was sadistic. That's how I think of him.
Definitely, 100%. This guy's name was Adam something. Everyone, sorry if everyone's watching the podcast. I'm not just on my phone here.
Yeah.
Adam something.
Yeah, but something I was going to say earlier is
Anyway, sorry.
Mentality doesn't necessarily need to be applied to physicality, and he even talks about that. You can go absolutely ham with studying some stuff, and then you're going to solidify those lessons in your brain a lot more than if you just half-ass studying things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important. That's because some people, and Goggins talks about it, that some people have had adversity, and then some people haven't had adversity, and that is adversity in itself. That if you haven't been pushed or you haven't been challenged in your life, that actually is a detriment to you. And I think because everything in life and just nature, people want to, what is it? Find the path of least resistance, right? So everyone wants to do shit easier, but like life is fucking tough, right? Life is hard. There is going to be moments in life, and things are going to happen to people around you that you know and that you love, or to you, or whatever, and to the world at large, and you're going to have to meet that adversity in a certain way. And if you've never faced anything in your life, that is going to seem like such a huge fucking thing.
Totally. Like, look at the whole COVID thing.
Oh my God.
For some people who have never had any adversity, this is their first real chunk, and it's absolutely fucked them. And I'm not saying that makes them weak. It's been really messed up.
And it's been nonstop too. So even people that have had some adversity, it's been relatively short-lived, but not like constantly like this, right?
Totally.
But yeah, like, I always used to say, like, after I finished playing football, like going up on stage and like doing anything was easy. Tests in school, it was easy because it wasn't a fucking football game. Because to me, that was like so fucking hard.
Oh, football's insane,
right? And like it was, anything compared to that was so much easier. So I couldn't imagine like being a Navy SEAL or a Marine or facing fucking crazy adversity in your life. And if you reframe it in a certain way, how powerful that can be, right? Because it just makes a molehill out of a mountain instantly. It reduces fear, and it reduces these problems immensely, because in comparison to some of the shit that you've already gone through, and essentially this is the same thing that Rogan is saying, and obviously in what Goggins is saying, is that in that discipline is freedom. In the hard challenge and the stuff that we view as the last thing we ever want to do should be the first thing we do, because it has so much value and all this shit. It's just no one wants to do it, and we live in a culture where what you want is very important now.
Totally.
It's always been what you need is important, and we try our best to meet those needs in society. But now we've gotten to a point where so many of those needs are met that it's like, what do you want? What do you feel? Oh, okay. We have all this food. You need this food, but which food do you want? That's where it starts. You need these clothes, but now you get to choose which color. And yes, that's amazing up to a certain point, and it is a freedom, but we start to be indulgent, right? We start to become like, well, I don't want it like this. I want it more like that. And now we're starting to bend reality, and we're starting to make concessions, and some people are going without, because whatever it is, we're getting away from these challenges, and there used to be daily challenges in life. Pre-industrial revolution, if we want to go back that far, there was daily challenges just to get fucking food. And now, especially with COVID, you don't have to leave your fucking house.
Yeah.
Right? So, I think that's the core, I guess, of what Can't Hurt Me is all about. More, not necessarily the core, but that's one of the biggest things, is that discipline will set you free. Right?
Totally.
Jocko Willing talks about that too.
He has a book that is literally called Discipline Equals Freedom.
Right.
Is that right?
100%, pretty sure.
Yeah.
1000%. No, I've definitely heard him talk about that. I was just thinking, because I was just looking up here too. So Can't Hurt Me audiobook came out in November 2018. And again, that Goggins talks about it. It's like really, really interesting book because it isn't just someone reading it. It has that kind of interview thing. And Malcolm Gladwell did a book that was like that too.
Who's Malcolm Gladwell?
So Malcolm Gladwell is... Here, I'm going to look him... Because he's like I think he was like a journalist, technically. But he's like really, really smart dude. Really, really interesting books. He wrote like... The Tipping Point, he's talks about the 10,000 hour rule.
Okay.
Talking to Strangers is another one of his books. He's actually Canadian, so he's a Canadian journalist. He used to write for the New Yorker, or he's been a New York staff writer since 1996. So anyway, he's just wrote like a million books. Outliers. You ever heard that book?
Maybe.
So Outliers is the one where it talks mostly about like 10,000 hour rule. You know, if you put enough time into something, you're going to master it. But it talks about like how certain people become certain, like obviously most professional athletes are outliers when it comes to like, you know, the average. Mm-hmm. Like they're outliers on almost every category in athleticism and blah, blah, blah. How do people actually get to there? Mm-hmm. And he talks about like, you know, where people were born in the year, and like there's a lot of different things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily think about. Anyway, his book Talking to Strangers was kind of like that too. The audiobook was like basically half a podcast.
Cool.
It's like very, very interesting to listen to. And if anyone wants to listen to that for free, you can actually get it through your local library. There's this thing called Libby, and it's a podcast app. If you've never used it, anyone listening or watching, check out Libby. They're not a sponsor of this podcast.
It could be,
but no, if you have a library card, just go check it out. And then you can you rent them, obviously, like a library, so you don't get to keep them. But that's how basically I listen to. That's basically how I listen to all the books I listened to when I was driving.
Cool.
So super cool. I was just kind of looking up the release date here of this audio of the Malcolm Gladwell one too, because I just wanted to see, because again, even just listening to the Can't Hurt Me, I know it's not in David Goggins' voice, but it's really cool. And again, it was the first one to do it, mm-hmm. which is really cool. So, but I don't know if I'm ever going to write a book, but I would love if anyone was ever going to do an audiobook to do it like this, because even in the Malcolm Gladwell one too, it's kind of like he gets to like interview a lot of the people that he talks about in the book, which is really cool, especially for nonfiction. Right? Because you kind of want to hear some of these people actually talk about it. Obviously, a lot of authors are just kind of condensing people's knowledge into a book. Mm-hmm. But it's cool when you actually get to hear them talk to these people. And Malcolm Gladwell has a cool podcast with Rick Rubin, too, the producer. Do you know him?
I know the name, but I can't remember.
He, like, started with the Beastie Boys. He produced, like, Jay-Z stuff.
Is he in NWA movie?
I think he might be a character in it. But he's in the 99 Problems video. The big guy with the beard and the huge fur coat with the glasses.
Okay.
He like helped produce some of the Black Album. He's like the man. He produced a lot of the Chili Pepper stuff too. Yeah, he's like very, very interesting producer, music producer, where I find like he's relatively hands off. I don't know. You never know, right? Like until you're in the studio with these guys. But it's interesting with music producers because you don't really want to ever have a heavy hand, because it's easy to like influence artists, and you want them to sound like them, right? You don't want them to sound like you, or you don't want their music to and every band that comes through you, they just are put through your filter and get kicked out. You want to help them make the best song that they can do.
Yeah. And
sometimes that takes maybe saying, listen, this is good, this isn't so good, why can't this be as good as this? but it's not going, hey, do this instead. Right?
Yeah, it's like if somebody goes into a martial arts gym and they already have a style that's well established, and a bad coach will try to completely shape them to what they think is a good idea.
Interesting.
But a good coach will take their skills and refine them and maybe tweak a couple things, but let them be them. And it seems like the same thing with a band or something like that.
I think that's the same thing for, honestly, any time you're managing people. I think it's the same thing for any coach in any sport, whether it's martial arts, whether it's a basketball team, because I've played for coaches where they just want to shove a round peg through a square hole as best they can, and it doesn't matter what kind of skill you have. And it's, don't get me wrong, it's way easier to do that and just be like, why can't you just do what I'm telling you to do, than like figuring out what their talents are and then going from there, right? So but I think that, again, you know, with music producers, that kind of hands-off approach, and Rick Rubin really has this kind of like less is more approach too, which is really interesting. But anyway, Malcolm Gladwell had that book, so that's kind of how we got there. But again, it's just interesting being able to actually hear Goggins go over the whole chapter again, because like some of the early stuff, like there's stories and they're fucking so brutal.
Oh my god.
And like at no point was I ever like, is this fucking real? But like this Adam guy was like, I'm a journalist, like I had to like fact check all this stuff, and all this stuff is fucking real. And it's Navy SEALs, right? He's doing like that training, man, is crazy.
Did you get to the knot tying part?
Not yet.
Oh, buddy.
Not yet.
That might be my favorite chapter in any book that I've ever read.
Really?
Yeah.
So where I'm at right now. So I just got to the point where he's like was like hiding food to like eat, like while they were like, he would hide like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like in his pocket and eat it when no one was looking.
Yeah.
So
You're really close to the knot tying part.
Okay. Yeah, it's like I guess third week of Hell Week or whatever it is, like the third portion of Hell Week, or
I don't remember.
Or whatever Hell Week is. There's like 3 sections of that. Like there's Hell, like the first one is fucked. The second half isn't as bad. The third half like isn't as compared to the first. Okay. So he's like moving on through buds, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, man, like I don't know. It's just it's interesting with that training because they talk about it. So buds, right? It's like basic training.
What does it stand for? Basic underground
demolition
something.
Yeah. Fuck. Yeah, I can look it up.
Yeah.
It's essentially, again, like, so Navy SEALs are already people who have been in the military, right? Like you can't just like show up, or can you?
I think you have to have prior service.
Right. I'm not sure.
At least I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Basic underwater demolition SEALs training.
Okay. Cool.
BUD/S. Buds. 24 weeks.
Brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, like most military training, they're like breaking you down to build you back up kind of thing. But because you're going to be like a Navy SEAL and you have to like, you know, deal with water, and essentially from what I gather, Navy SEALs are like the people you send into places that like no one wants to go. Like they're like the fucking, like where you have to like get into some place without being seen or whatever. And a lot of that is like you're either parachuting in or like you're like swimming underwater somewhere. You're doing wild shit in uncomfortable places, cold, heat, again, water, sand, fucking all this shit. So they're putting you through all this stuff, hypothermia. Like there's obviously people watching and training, but that's the biggest thing. Basically at every point, there's like a way out.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
And the training is so hard. It's designed to break people, and every once in a while somebody dies.
Yeah.
Like that's how intense it is.
Well, that's why Goggins actually got kicked out at one point, right? Because he had sickle cell.
Twice. Or no, that wasn't even
the second time was something different. Oh, that was for the Air Force.
Yeah, for the Air Force.
Oh, true.
With sickle cell trait. The first time he got kicked out of Hell Week, I think, because he had double pneumonia.
Right.
And that was where the back on the log thing came from.
Yes, yeah.
Which has become a catchphrase. I have a shirt that says back on the log, which my mom decided to buy me for Christmas, but I love the shirt.
Unreal. So tell everyone what that means.
So David Goggins had double pneumonia in his first Hell Week.
Jesus.
And then the staff was trying to sit him out because he was like, I don't know if he was coughing up blood, but he was coughing up all sorts of fucked up shit. And his breathing sounded horrible. And they were doing an exercise where they carried logs, and the staff kept sitting him down, but he kept refusing and he kept getting up. And there was a guy he was in med check for an injury, so he could hear what was going on the staff's radio.
Right.
And he kept hearing the staff be like, "Oh, we lost Goggins. Goggins is back on the log. We repeat, Goggins is back on the log." So that's where that came from.
Oh, that's unreal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, David Goggins is, and I think Duncan Trussell talks about some of his friends think David Goggins is enlightened.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like he's just another, again, this is another level type of human, who has essentially found the hardest way possible to do everything. I can relate to that sometimes too, but
yeah,
but not by choice. That's for sure. His seems to be by choice.
I don't think he's enlightened. I think he is a slave to his mind. I don't know. Maybe he is enlightened, but he talks about having this voice in his mind that he always knows is what he should be going towards, and that voice usually takes him to do difficult things. But I wonder if that's his conditioning, because his dad beat the shit out of him and constantly reinforced the idea that he was a pussy, essentially.
Sure.
So that would be the voice you would think.
Right.
That's telling him he's weak all the time. So he's going to spite that most of the time.
Well, I think that's a really natural thought for a lot of people when we can't really understand what they're thinking with shit. Because I don't know if I could bring myself to get to that, his level of discipline per se, but I think what the question that is raised is what is he trying to drown out, essentially? What is he running away from, more or less?
Yeah.
And
what
I
is
think
he
it's
beating
the shit out of himself for? What is he trying to drown? These are all the questions that we ask ourselves, right? Because it's but it could be to the point where his mental, his spiritual nature, his mental nature, whatever his inner, whatever you want to call it, it's definitely spiritual for sure if we're talking enlightenment, but whatever that means, that he has ascended something, right? Which is, I don't know. I can't say for sure. I don't know him well enough. I don't know him now.
Yeah.
But I mean, Duncan Trussell also said this too, so it could have been just a fucking joke.
Maybe, but I wouldn't rule out him being enlightened. But I wouldn't rule out him just being an absolute slave to his ego either.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that I'm sure the thoughts of him being enlightened also come from the fact that he can shut his body down, shut the voice in his head saying you got to quit. He can shut that off.
Yeah.
Which I feel is a trait of enlightenment, is you can shut, because that could be the ego.
Yeah.
Right. It could be the ego saying you can't do this. Stop. Which again, I've mentioned before in this show, it's important. It will save you. You won't get hurt if you listen to that voice, but you're not going to accomplish big things, is what he's saying, right? He's just saying his whole, David Goggins' whole thing is that you run the risk of living a life so comfortable that you'll never, see the capabilities, you'll never see the possibilities or the your true potential.
Yeah. And he talks about going and seeing God, and then God reading that list. Have you heard this?
I think that's early in it, right?
Yeah, but he always brings it up in interviews.
Okay.
And now I'm forgetting the details, but he has this vision of getting to God when he's lived a life of comfort and stuff, and God is reading all these things that he should have accomplished. He should have been a Navy SEAL. He should have had the world chin-up record, but because he didn't listen to that voice, he didn't accomplish any of those things.
Sure.
And I think he thinks that everybody is born with a potential for their destiny, but you just have to go out and do it.
Sure.
I heard this from my mom the other day. She talked to somebody who had a good quote that was just because you have gifts doesn't mean you don't have to work for them.
Sure.
You might have this gem inside of you, but you got to chip all the fucking ice around it or whatever.
Right.
To get to that gem. Just because you're gifted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like steroids too. You can't just inject yourself and it's going to go great.
Yeah.
You have to do the work.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, and again, we said right off the bat too, this whole Goggins' whole approach is a very intense, aggressive, like smash and grab kind of approach. It's not subtle. It's not, but again, you know, because you talk about like fucking monks and shit that like go and like can meditate like all day, like that is that level of discipline.
Yeah, totally.
Right, where you can just be like, every little thing that comes up, if anyone's ever meditated, every little thing that comes up, you can just shut that down. Doesn't matter. Any passing thought, whatever it is, whatever you're trying to accomplish, you can get there. And then that's, I guess, enlightenment in a certain way. Maybe there's different definitions of enlightenment too.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sure there's like a Buddhist form, but then, you know, is enlightenment just an increase in your, like, you know, opening your mind a little bit more? You know, can there be like an incremental enlightenment, you know?
Yeah.
Or is it just you're not enlightened and then at next moment you're enlightened? Like that is a big distinction. I don't know.
Yeah, this is a conversation that I feel like you and I will continue to revisit. And I'm excited to see 5 years from now. Because whenever we get on the subject of enlightenment, I'm like, I don't even fucking know, man. It's so, like, sometimes I think I understand what that means, and then I figure out that I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that's the nature of enlightenment, right? Is that it's almost like death, where it's like, it's another realm of it's another state of mind, let's put it that way, that you can't, like, really understand unless you're there.
Yeah.
And no one, like, maybe there's people that have gone and are enlightened and can come and tell us what they've learned. But maybe, like, our unenlightened brain can't actually comprehend that. Right? So right, yeah,
because
this is what we come to.
Yeah, we're slaves to our own lens of perspective. So an enlightened person could come tell us some shit, but we can't even understand it because it's going to be cut with our ego and stuff.
Big time. Because that's what I was just going to say. Is enlightenment just being free of the ego? Right?
Yeah.
Because, like, is like doing the right amount of mushrooms and you feel that ego dissolution, is that like a feeling of temporary enlightenment?
And I think there's a word for temporary enlightenment, but is all enlightenment temporary?
Potentially.
Because, I don't know, is enlightenment just supreme presence? Because if you're supremely present, then you're not thinking, and then you're not going to be carried away by your ego. Right. So enlightenment might just be moment to moment, always being present. I don't know.
But is that one of those things where, like, this is where I kind of get stuck on too, is like, does that mean, like, are you going to survive if you become enlightened and you're so present? Like, are you going to remember to eat? Are you, like, if you're not going to go to your fucking job, or are you, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Right. Like, is becoming enlightened just like all of a sudden the veil is lifted and you're fucking Neo in the Matrix, or right? Or are you like, or do you have to go to Tibet and like be a monk? Like, do you have to? Because you're fucking, or are you in a loony bin? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, who knows? Like, I think someone said that. Like, who knows how many how many messiahs are in fucking are in mental health wards because they come back and say, I'm Jesus, and they go, okay, here you go, bud, and now you're locked away.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe they're not lying. Maybe they're not wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
But and you know, I've told you about about a friend of mine who has,
wasn't going to bring it up, but
we won't go deep into it, but like, you know, certain things said in certain contexts can be taken really like for just that. They can be taken out of context. And, you know, even some of the stuff that we've talked about, like, you know, if someone was like, if we just said that randomly to someone and been like, you know, like, we are all consciousness potentially. Like, there's a potential that we all share a collective consciousness that we can tap into and we can learn from. And there's something, if you just like blurt that out,
people get worried.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not even like that outlandish, right? Like,
to us and the communities that we speak to, but some people, that's some next level shit.
That's true.
Yeah.
But even still, like, there's even more wild shit that we don't even know about, right? Like that if someone just said to you out of nowhere and you had no warm up and you didn't know this person at all, you'd be like, okay, that guy's crazy.
Yeah.
And again, contextually speaking, where you are, read the room, all that shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the trouble, and I think that's some way, you know, not to get like conspiratorial about it, but then that's a way that the powers that be, or they, or the government, or whoever you want to say, can like keep this shit down, is by saying like people who talk about this shit are crazy.
Yeah.
Which is like, I feel like we're starting to, in this day and age, we're getting more away from that, because when it comes to spirituality stuff, usually people are fairly open to it these days.
Yeah, it's
when it comes to
more
certain
so.
things, maybe we're not so open.
Yeah.
Like, you know, obviously.
But I think people are realizing there's a giant missing piece, and
Right.
I think a lot of people are turning towards spirituality.
And people aren't as judgy unless you're like pushing it on somebody. People are a lot more open to like listening to what you have to say.
Yeah.
Unless you're like, again, trying to convert somebody, or like pushing it, or like doing weird shit, like cult shit, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, that's good, and it gets the word out a little bit more, but I think that is you know, if it is a conspiracy, or if it is people trying to suppress that information, there is a worry that if everyone, like we were saying, if everyone becomes enlightened, will anyone even like work? Right? So maybe that is like the true, like, it's not particularly evil. It's just like, you know, if you really want to get into the shit, you're going to have to kind of become a monk. And then therefore, how can we have like an economy? Maybe we can figure something out where it works, and like that is like the enlightenment of our entire culture and society.
Yeah.
Is where we can ascend, like we can get robots and stuff to do all like to you know, clean shit and like, you know, whatever, because that could be that actually could be the good shit that Musk talks about, and like, you know, AI and all
Lex
this stuff
talks about that a lot.
that
like
we're scared
robots
of.
being like helpful for people.
Yeah, that as much as it's terrifying, and who knows, it could go either way. If we create an artificial intelligence that's purely sentient, it could say, fuck you guys, you're done. We're way better. We're made of titanium and shit, you're done.
Yeah.
Or they could be like, well, this is what we do. We're fucking machines. We take care of this shit. And then you guys can go and fucking ascend into whatever. And then or, you know, not to circle back to Rogan, but that's what Rogan says too, that we're going to like meld with them and become one with machines.
Yeah.
And then that could be a form of like enlightenment, ascension, whatever, you know, to the next level kind of thing, that allows us to not worry about wars anymore, not worry about hunger and all the bullshit that distracts us from these thoughts. And then we can really put some time into like actually figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting thought, that robots could pick up the slack. Because right now it's not practical to chase enlightenment. I would love to just meditate all the time. Well, kind of, like it fucking sucks at times. But I love the idea of being able to just dial in on that kind of study.
Yeah.
But it's just not practical. I got to work, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes if you meditate a lot, you open some shit up in your mind, and then you're not really effective at your job because you're like, I don't know, dabbling in multiple frequencies.
Sure.
It's just not practical.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember doing a big mushroom trip and like having to come back. I've mentioned it before. We might have even talked about this last podcast, but like I had to essentially make a decision to be like, are you going to go full on into, you know, the spiritual realm and like what you saw and what you felt, and try to get back there, essentially throwing away life and like go and become a monk, or like figure out how to integrate this stuff into life, which is going to be it was a conscious decision to be like, I have to figure this out, because if not, I'm just going to be like spinning.
Totally.
Because again, you know, everyone's heard I obviously advocate for psychedelic use, but obviously safe psychedelic use, and it can have a really really disjarring feeling for anyone who hasn't experienced it. And there's a point called reintegration where you're trying to take a lot of those lessons or a lot of that information that, or those feelings that you felt, and kind of reintegrate them into your life. And I think that's what I felt. And luckily I was able to think that, but I think there's a lot of people out there that don't necessarily have that feeling.
Yeah.
and that's that big thing where, you know, it's like trying to come back from this other realm and try and bring this information and be like, hey, check this out. Like, check out all this stuff that we learned. But like, people are like, I don't even know what that is. Like, I don't even know where you're coming from. Right. So I think that's always the biggest issue for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, you know, that same approach where it's like that psychonaut thing where some people are like, I don't even want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. As much as people are afraid to like push themselves and run and fucking go nuts, like a lot of people are afraid to like go into the mind too. Right.
Totally.
And I think that again is what Goggins is touching on, is that those times that you do stuff that is scary or like uncomfortable or, you know, whatever it is, when you make it through that on the other side, you're a better person, or you're at least have learned a lesson or two.
For sure.
But I think that's what happens, is that, you know, people, they actively avoid and they avoid, right? So
for sure. And then that has all sorts of horrible effects. That's one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about today, was just the lostness of our society.
Right.
Because people gravitate towards comfort and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then it becomes a case they don't even know what to do to make themselves healthy. Like we talked a little bit about whatever the deal was in BC with health officials, doctors being able to prescribe going to national parks as a means to optimize mental health. Super cool, but insane that is like news to people that shit helps you, you know? Like,
right. Well, yeah. But I think
so
that
crazy
goes to
that
tell you,
people don't make the connection that going outside is good for you.
Right.
And when I hear somebody who's like, I'm not an outdoor person, it's like, we're fucking humans. We're animals. We didn't even have homes or shelter for so long. This is all a recent thing.
Sure.
It's just we're just so disconnected. It's nuts.
You're so right. And I think that's a really interesting point, especially over the past couple of years. Like, people weren't even necessarily allowed to go outside.
It's so crazy.
Right? Like, yeah, you could go to like, in fact, nature was really the only place you could go for that matter. But on the whole, most people were like confined to being inside. So think about that. Not only if you even wanted to go outside, now you couldn't.
Yeah.
So
you're not allowed to go outside.
Right. But I think that whole BC thing also touches on the point of like, unfortunately, people still need to have like their doctor tell them this is what it is.
Totally. Yeah.
And as much as that, it can be good, because then we do avoid certain scenarios, like with what you're happening with Joe Rogan, right? Where people are like, this guy's not a doctor. Who gives a fuck? Mm-hmm. Which is a lot of people. A lot of people say that.
For sure.
But I feel like if you went back like 40, 50 years, it would be exactly that. Mm-hmm. It would be like, who the fuck is this guy? He's a what? And he fucking hosted what show?
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They'd be like, who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
Right? But nowadays, which is, I think, it is a step in the right direction. It is a step towards being more open-minded, is that we are way more accepting of people's voices as long as we agree with what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Right? It doesn't matter what their credentials are.
Yeah.
As long as what they're saying goes along with our narrative, we're going to bolster them up.
Yeah. That being said, I feel like it's also a bad era for people becoming quote unquote experts on things.
Precisely.
Like, you shouldn't think doctors are gods, but doctors have to fucking earn being a doctor. That's no serious or no minor gig, you know?
100%.
So I feel like we're just in an age where people can listen to a podcast and then spit information like they know it off, like they know it in depth, you know? Whereas that is not the case.
Yeah. And you know, even like university degrees, I feel like today are starting to become less valuable because so many people have them. Mm-hmm. It kind of becomes like, okay, well, yeah, I have this degree too. Like, what did you actually do to get that? Right? Where, again, like you said, doctors, whatever these experts are, they put the time in. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people have devalued that time, or because a lot of these people, maybe they're not articulate enough, or they're not like in the public eye, so to speak. So then you have other, whether they're, you know, TV personalities or whatever, they're actually just relaying that information because they need a voice. Mm-hmm. But I think, like you said, like that like anybody's an expert now. And if you have enough followers on Instagram, that is some type of accreditation.
Yeah.
Where it's like, what? You know what I mean? So,
Well, it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Donald Trump,
Yeah.
people who were celebrities and became.
yeah. I mean,
like-
Ronald Reagan was an actor.
Okay, I guess I knew that. Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
some like politics. It kind of makes sense. Like
I know
over the years,
nothing about
Jesse
Arnold
Ventura,
Schwarzenegger's politics, by the way.
Right.
Oh yeah, Jesse Ventura.
Minnesota.
Or Trump's for that matter.
But you're right. And generally speaking, you know, you never really had like celebrities becoming politicians before. But I think nowadays you are. And again, it's because, you know, of the culture and how much people listen to social media and how much that, like, there used to be probably like 5% or less of people that used to have these crazy extreme voices. Let's just say 5% if it's like normal distribution. There's that 5% on each side that had crazy wild thoughts, extreme right, extreme left, whatever, but they were so extreme and so like it was such a small minority of people talking, they never had any platforms to speak their minds. In fact, their actual opinions were probably more like just like thought exercises for like the general public. But now with social media, a lot of those people from those fringes are able to speak their mind, and people listen. Because like I said, it's these echo chambers, it's confirmation bias, it's all this stuff. If you're saying what people want to hear, they'll listen no matter what it is.
For sure.
And there's some people out there that are just who they are, and they're going to talk and people will listen. But then there's some people out there that are making a concerted effort and being like, this is what we need to say to get the most people listening.
Yeah.
And then we'll give them ads, and then we'll do whatever. Most of it is fucking just selling people shit at the end of the day. But then you have shit where we are kind of trying to control people. And there's, you know, that is the only way we do have, you know, a way to talk to people en masse, right? You know, religion's kind of out the door. That used to be a good way to kind of control people and get ideas disseminated and, you know, say that there's an invisible dude up in the sky that if you don't do what we tell you, you're going to hell. That worked for a long time. It was a good scam, you have to admit. But now it's harder to convince people of shit. And I think there's so many voices, whether it's through social media or whatever, that it's just essentially fucking muddied the waters and no one really knows where to go.
Yeah.
You know, if you go back to the 60s, there was like 3 news channels.
Yeah.
If that. And it was like, that was the news. And in your heart, you're like, these people aren't going to tell us bullshit.
Yeah.
This is the news. I trust this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then slowly but surely, lies, Watergate, fucking president doing weird shit. Like there's all this stuff,
Totally,
right?
yeah. Where
Where now here we are today, and I think this is the problem, and this is where the postmodernist whole view comes from, is that all this fucked up shit has happened. What does anything matter anymore?
Yeah.
What can we possibly ground ourselves in now? Because even the institutions that at one point we put all this faith in aren't going to fucking help us anymore. And it's only left to the people.
Yeah.
But yet the people have no power.
Yeah.
So right, it becomes this paradox where
For
you wind up at this dead end of like, we can't do shit.
Yeah.
But that's not 100% true.
But
But
like
that's just how people feel.
And then they fall into the trap of working a job that they hate and then going home and then mind numbing with
Nihilism.
yeah, nihilism or avoidance, you know?
Sure.
Because going home and just crushing chips or booze or whatever it is and then not having the motivation to make change or search for any deeper truth.
Right.
And they're forced to just be part of the rat race, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's hard to break out of that.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing. You know, it's like it's Plato's cave
I don't know.
or Aristotle's. No, I think it's Plato's cave. I've talked about this before on the podcast, but yeah, the allegory of the cave.
Never heard of it.
So it's a thought experiment Plato kind of brought up. But so imagine a cave, right? Deep, dark cave. Go inside. There's no light, except for like these fires that are built. So there's like artificial fires. And then there's people sitting by like chained to a wall. and they can't like move their head around. They're like facing one wall of the cave. And behind these guys, there's dudes with torches and like cut out pictures of like shapes, like a shape of a horse and like shape of a watering can and like a person.
Mm-hmm.
And they're essentially like doing like a play of reality for the people that are chained to the wall watching this wall. So it's like the shapes are illuminated onto the wall with the flame,
mm-hmm.
right? And the people watching these objects dance on the wall, that's what they think reality is.
Mm-hmm.
They're just representations of what the true objects are, but to these people sitting there, that is their entire reality.
Yeah.
Now imagine one of these people becomes unchained and like walks out of the cave and like is like blinded by the light and is like seeing like a real horse and like a real shit like for the first time, and like you're fucking bombarded and you're tripping, and then you're going back and you're going to try and tell these people that are still chained to the wall that what they're looking at isn't everything. It's a mere representation of what reality is. Mm. Everything else is out there. It's just have to unshackle yourself, release yourself. But no one knows. Everyone's so afraid that they would rather sit there and just be given what they're anyway.
Totally.
So it's an allegory of reality. It's an allegory of the psychedelic experience. It's an allegory of a lot of different things. But it's that thought experiment of like trying to come back. I think one of the most important parts is trying to come back and actually telling people what it is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Because there's no basis. There's nothing that they can possibly base what you're telling them on in their reality. You can't be like, yeah, that shape of that horse, it's actually this real horse. And it looks like, and you'd be like you can't even go outside what you've been shown.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Your brain is set with what you've been shown. And I think that's another part of that allegory that's important too, is that people are set in their ways. Mm-hmm. They understand what they understand. And the only way that they can understand new things is through the lens of what they already understand. And the hardest part is unshackling yourself from that mental constraint and being open to new experiences. But those new experiences can be jarring, and they can throw your whole fucking shit off. Mm-hmm. And they can completely, shake your foundation. But that's the only way we grow. And I think that's what Goggins says. That's what fucking Joe Rogan says. So what a lot of people say that, are, whether they're successful or they're trying to help other people be successful, that's what they say is that, the you got to get in to get out kind of thing, right? And you got to, the hardest and easiest way through anything is going right head first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And going back, that was dope. That was a good tangent. Not a tangent, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Going back to people being more open to spirituality than ever before.
Yeah.
Like people only know what they know, but
right.
I think collectively people are starting to realize what we're doing is not working,
Right.
So that's making them want to seek and being more open to uncomfortable experience, whether that's like reading a book that challenges their beliefs or going and doing some difficult physical shit that makes them have to dig deep and so discovering a different level of consciousness,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the thing is that, like you said, people are more open to those kind of things now, where,
Well, I feel like we're being pushed to have to find another way of doing things because what we do doesn't work.
Right.
Like just there's like a fucking mental health epidemic going on right now. Right. People are fucked.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like we're on that precipice too of some big change kind of happening, and whether that's another renaissance or that is us moving into this age of enlightenment. That's also evidence of we're at the end of like the empire, like the American empire is we're witnessing like the end of it.
True.
Which is really fascinating because.
You mean in the sense of like America being the biggest power thing in the world and seemed to always have the answers shit. And
because it used to be like the Roman Empire, then it was like the British Empire, then Americans were running shit, and now that shit's coming to an end, and China might show up. Who knows who's going to take up slack? But we're essentially witnessing the end of that empire, and there's history to show that at the end of the Roman Empire there was a lot of like identity politics and stuff where nothing matters and like fuck everything, let's just fuck and have sex and like who cares about whatever. That is kind of, that happens at the end of empires, because you go, what the fuck, there's no rules, laws are bullshit, you know, money doesn't mean anything, all that stuff, which again, like we said, maybe that's just the end of the empire, but also is that everyone just like reframing everything in life and actually questioning this shit, because for thousands of years most people have not had access to the information that we have today. Human beings, most people, at least in first world countries, have access to literally all information. There's very little information out there that is guarded anymore. That used to be the realm of universities and colleges, but they don't even have that power anymore because of the internet, which is amazing. And the internet's only fucking few decades old at this point. So we're at not only are we at the end of this empire, but we are at the beginning of this whole new internet age still, where it's like, you don't have to fucking go to university. If you apply yourself hard enough, you can get everything you know. It's just some of the actual, like, I would be really worried about like learning to be a surgeon or like, you know, practical shit, but like knowledge-based stuff, English, fucking philosophy, some psychology stuff, you can basically figure out all you need to know on the internet kind of thing. And I think that is completely tipped the scales with everything, because I think you go far back in history, there was kings and queens, you know, and they obviously had power over people. Then you had religion coming in big time, where that was dominating over people, and then school, and then all these different things were government institutions, social institutions have existed to kind of keep people down. And people have been so distracted with just getting by and day to day and paying their bills and feeding their children that they haven't had time to sit and think about this shit. But even over the last 2 years, even since the last time you're on this fucking show, people haven't had a lot of time to fucking sit and think about shit. Totally. And a lot of people are going, fuck this. In fact, there was people fucking just driving by today in the big convoy, which I don't agree with, but this is what happens, is that it pushes people to this state where they start to go fucking nuts, and they start doing wild shit because they can't friggin' figure out what to do anymore, and they're sick of just sitting there and taking shit. So it's scary. It's a dawning of some type of change. Something big is happening for sure. Maybe we'll figure it out. Who knows? But I don't know. But that's all the time we have today.
Cool. I was hoping to incorporate some quote from a book that I've been reading that is so like relevant to all the shit we've been talking about. I think it's called Ageless Wisdom Spirituality or something like that.
Okay.
But it just talks about how we're on the verge of some kind of change, but it kind of has to happen now or we're fucked. Because there's so many people out there who are...
Teachings?
No, I have it, a picture of it on my phone from the page of the book. But there's so many people out there who are waking up, so to speak. They're doing psychedelics, they're meditating, they're eating properly, all these things, which should be the norm, but it's not. But there's not going to be a drastic change unless a lot of people come together and make a big change, you know?
That's right.
And Andy James, he's the guy who wrote the book. He's the guy who do the Vipassana retreats with.
Oh, unreal.
So the fucking coolest guy. Like when he was young, like 20, he was trying to debunk all these different religions. He described them as opioids for the people or something like that. He thought religion was bullshit.
Nietzsche said that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So he debunked all these things, and then he got to Buddhism and he couldn't find any holes in it. So he doesn't consider himself a Buddhist, but most of his philosophy comes from Buddhism. A lot of it comes from Hinduism. He's just super cool. He's got 3 books. I couldn't recommend him more. Very cool. He just talks about how change isn't going to happen on its own, basically. So we need to figure out some way, and I haven't got to the end of the book, so I don't have the solution yet, but it might take me a minute to find this, and it might not be super relevant. I was just hoping we could work it into the conversation because I really liked it when I read it.
Yeah, but I think that's that nugget there that you're saying, where I think more and more people are doing it. I think it's almost like it's like the you know, the smallest little snowflake that falls on a mountain and slowly starts rolling down a hill and becomes an avalanche, right? And I think that is where we're at. We're in that point where things are starting to build and the momentum is gaining, and more people are getting into these things that were whether it was stigmatized or just harder to access, there are a lot of these things where people are going through these rites of passage a lot more. And I think it's as much as it's divisive politically, I think it's actually bringing people together, because the biggest fucking shit you get from whether it's yoga or psychedelics is that we're all one and we're all together, and that's the best lesson you could learn, right? Mm-hmm. So what you got?
We'll see. It might. Yeah, I found it. We'll see if it applies. I think New Age spirituality is indeed a movement towards higher consciousness, in particular at the psychic level, but in its present form lacks the focus and urgency to dramatically impact everyday life. It is a colorful mixture of genuine spiritual work, charlatanism, narcissism, over-idealism. Many New Agers are old hippie flower children in a new guise. Guys? I don't know.
Guys.
And messianic cults. So yeah, it's just him saying, I don't know, a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like there is a movement towards another level of consciousness, but a lot of people are misguided and stuff. And
yeah, I think that's the thing, that it's 100% what we've been saying too, is that, you know, as much as there's more and more people getting into it, there's just as many people that are trying to get into it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And there's just as many people that, you know, are quick to judge other people too. I think is the biggest part, is that as much as we mentioned it ad nauseum tonight, that things are becoming more welcoming, there's also that part of culture, whether it's cancel culture or certain things, where if you don't hear what you want to hear, we're canceling that. It's over. Shut the fuck up. There's a weird censorship it's a strange time to live, right? Because we're living in this simultaneously living in this new world where we're breaking barriers and doing things that have never been done before and breaking conventions, and then at the same time, like, increasing censorship and doing all these kind of draconian things to, like, push that narrative of being more open. Like, it's like, you're not open-minded enough, you're going to jail.
Yeah.
Or, like, I don't know, it's strange. So, but that's amazing quote. I think that nails it right on the head, is that as much as, you know, there are, you got to be careful of the charlatans out there, and there are people that are fucking around, but at the same time, there are people doing really good work, and it is work. It takes that effort, and you got to put it in, and whether it's Goggins level effort, right? Or whether it's, you know, you're just fucking putting a toe in one day at a time, just trying to get in, and eventually it's going to take over your body cell by cell, right? You know, things don't always happen at once, but there's different approaches, like we said from the start, right? There's so many different approaches that we can all find, and it's about finding yours, but the most important part is you actually going out and doing it, cracking the crust. And once you break the ice and getting in that fucking cold water, it sucks for a second, but once you get out, it feels amazing, right?
Totally. It's funny, we didn't even talk about our experience.
We didn't even fucking talk. Oh, God. That's for the next show. Don't even worry about it. We all have still have 10 toes. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, brother. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Like I said, go check out the podcast if you ever want to reach us or message us, DM us. Check us out on our Instagram or our Twitter at the Bigmark Pod, at the Bigmark Podcast. You can donate to the podcast at our Patreon, patreon.com/Bigmark Podcast. Hit that bell, notifications, rate the podcast. Please go tell your friends. Spread the word about Darren. Where can everyone find you? On Instagram?
On Instagram. I haven't fully embraced that world yet.
At Darren44 Brooks?
At Darren44 Brooks,
That's
which means I haven't decided on a name yet, but someday I will.
It's unreal. Go check out his personal training stuff. Go see him do some handstands or some shit like that. Right?
Yeah. Learn how to move comfortably and efficiently in all directions.
That's right. That's what we're all about, baby. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon. Peace.